I want to read to you from Exodus, the story of the burning bush. You remember that Moses had been brought up in the court of Pharaoh, having been rescued from the bulrushes and all that. Already had a very eventful life. Then he'd ventured out to do a bit of social justice and finished up by killing an Egyptian who was abusing an Israelite. Then the word got round, so his life was on the line, so he fled. He finishes up looking after some sheep. Exodus 3. Moses was minding the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, priest of Midian. He led the flock along the side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. Then the angel of the Lord appeared to him in the flame of a burning bush. Moses noticed that although the bush was on fire, it was not being burnt up. So he said to himself, I must go across and see this wonderful sight. Why does not the bush burn away? And when the Lord saw that Moses had turned aside to look, he called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses answered, Yes, I am here. And God said, Come no nearer. Take off your sandals. The place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your forefathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And Moses covered his face, for he was afraid to gaze at God. And the Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard their outcry against their slave masters. I have taken heed of their sufferings and have come down to rescue them from the power of Egypt and to bring them up out of that country into a fine, broad land that is a land flowing with milk and honey, the home to the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. The outcry of the Israelites has reached me. Yes, I have seen the brutality of the Egyptians towards them. Come now, I will send you to Pharaoh, and you will bring my people Israel out of Egypt. But who am I, Moses said to God, that I should go to Pharaoh, and that I should bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God answered, I will be with you. And this shall be the proof that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship me on this mountain. Then Moses said to God, if I go to the Israelites and tell them that the God of their forefathers has sent me to them, they will ask me his name. What shall I say? And God answered, I am. That is who I am. Tell them that I am has sent you to them. Moses is a great character. Moses, for me, is not the sort of person who can sort of say colloquially, well, don't we often feel like Moses? I don't often feel like Moses, to be honest. And you've got that sense that Moses is the great man, isn't it? But when you get the business of the bulrushes and the, being an Egyptian prince, and then the burning bush, and then the plagues, and then the crossing the Red Sea, and then the tablets of stone on Sinai. I don't know. I mean, he's a great man. I learn a lot, but I don't necessarily feel I identify with Moses. And yeah, I just want to sink into this passage, because this is a great story. Just think through this. It's one of my favourite stories. Just think about the passage and think, well, I've got quite a bit in common with Moses, really. Quite a bit in common. I think he's a person who's got, in his life, he's got some unfulfilled aspirations. I don't know what his aspirations were as a prince of Egypt, but he could have been, Pharaoh. He could have been finished up building his own pyramid, It's great, and one of the great civilizations of the ancient world, reading, writing, everything, amazing stuff. Well, now he's keeping sheep. Or he could have done the social justice thing. He could have gone to the Israelites, and he could have, when he came about, he could have finished up like Joseph, saving everybody. But he didn't do any of that at all. Now he's in one of the most obscure parts of the Sinai Peninsula, looking after somebody else's sheep. He's a man of... There's nothing in... Don't let's get me wrong on this. There's nothing in Genesis, in Exodus, which says that in some way Moses is a tragic person. They don't do that sort of thing. But we know that he has unfulfilled hopes and aspirations. You see that in his story. And I think we all do as well. You don't have to be miserable to have unfulfilled aspirations. You know, I think with 10 minutes of talking to any of you this morning, we could find some unfulfilled aspirations, you know. When I came here, I'd done quite a lot of serious cross-country running and running over mountains, and I looked at West Penwith and I thought, that moorland that runs across West Penwith is almost a continual strip. I will, at some stage, run from Carnbrae by Land's End over to St Ives. That's not a big problem. It wasn't a big problem. But you know, I had 3 operations and my knees went and I'm working on it and I'm running. I can run 7-10 miles. It's not a problem. But I could say at this stage, I am not going to run. I am not going to run the whole length of West Penwith. I regret that, really. It's only a small thing, but you know, there have been times in my ministry when I thought we might have what everybody used to call a revival, you know. And there's been people become Christians and great things have happened, but I would regret the fact that in my ministry there has not been a revival. There looked as though at various stages there might have been a revival in the National Methodist Church, but it decided it didn't want revival. So, you know, there are unfulfilled aspirations, and I agree. A disappointment's a bit strong, I think, but unfulfilled. And perhaps there is with you. You perhaps, I don't know, you might feel, I'm never going to grow flowers or vegetables that's going to win prizes. You know, I think they're great, but I'm not going to win prizes. I always hoped to do this. I've got this special compost, but it's not going to happen. You know, I always thought I could to get more qualifications, and I didn't get those qualifications. I wanted that job, or I didn't get that job. I got a great job, but not that job. You know. Or perhaps it's really common in our generation. Perhaps you feel a lack of fulfillment in the sense of the hope that your children or your grandchildren should come to the faith and know Jesus, and they don't, and you feel that's unfulfillment. You feel that's a shame. That's sad about it. Perhaps in yourself you think, I wish I'd been more of a saint than I am, but it's looking a bit late for that sort of thing. Or I've tried very hard, or I'm in a busy pace of life, or an early, whatever it is. There's a sense of unfulfillment. You don't, as I say, it's not depression. You just think, I wish. You remember the guys on the road to Emmaus? We had hoped. We had hoped. We had hoped. So I feel I'm a bit like that with to be absolutely honest, with Moses. But in spite of that, here's a guy who's getting on with his life. We've said this quite a bit after Easter. Those guys going to Emmaus. They've lost it with Jesus. It's all a bit gloomy, but they're still walking, they're still eating, they've still got a place to go to, they're still going to go to bed, and they're still going to get up in the morning. And even with Peter, you know, he's lost it with Jesus and all that, but he goes fishing to catch some fish. Life goes on. And we're not just making do, we're having a good life, most of us. And so Moses has a life. He gets himself a family, he wins himself a wife, he's got a kid. You know? But he calls this son, Gershom. Why? Because he still feels that he's an alien. An alien, not an alien in a way we might say. It means he doesn't quite fit in. He didn't fit in with the Egyptians in the court because he still felt he was an Israelite. When he went to the Israelites, he didn't fit in with them because they thought he was an Egyptian. Now he's in this obscure place with a lot of Canaanite sheep. So he calls his son Gershom, which means I am an alien. Again, he's getting on with life, but he doesn't really fit in. And again, how many of you don't really fit in? That doesn't mean you're completely dysfunctional about everything, but it means that the sort of person you are, aspects of you, the shape of you, think, jigsaw puzzle bit, it doesn't quite go into the hole that everybody's made for you. You know, the family want you to be slightly different than you are. That your friends want you to be slightly different. That your job, it wants you to be slightly different than you are. You're not really quite happy with the shape you are because sin makes us the wrong shape. So, I'm not quite there. Perhaps you don't even think this is the right church to be in. You know, it's not bad, but you can go to another church. So we're never quite at home, are we, as Henri Nouwen would say? Never quite at home with ourselves. There's all that slight tension about who I am and who I'm supposed to be and who the Lord wants me to be, and they don't quite mesh. But he's still getting on with life. He might feel a bit of a dysfunction in his life, and he might feel a bit of disappointment in his life, but he's still getting on with life. He's going on. And that's the same with us, isn't it? He's a common to garden guy. And it's interesting that getting on with life means leading this sheep, which doesn't mean a scruffy shepherd with a few sheep. This would have been a big flock. A shepherd may have had other shepherds. It's an important job. But notice this. This is one of the interesting things about this passage. You'll get this out of the Good News, the New English Bible rendering of the Hebrew. And he led the sheep along the edge of the wilderness. In other words, you don't take sheep in the wilderness because you all die. It's just a desert. But you don't take sheep on the mountains because it's a bit rough up there and it's all rocks. But between the two, there is an area of scrub and grass that you lead them on that they eat. And you all live. That is a great picture, isn't it, of life. He's living life between being killed by the Egyptians and annihilated, but he's not on the holy mountain. He's not in a great place of blessing. He's not seeing the fire. He's just living his life. As Delirious say in their song, we live between the mountain and the plain. And all of us tend to live on that track, that in-between track between disaster and utmost blessing. We live somewhere between it all going wrong and it all going right. We avoid the disasters of not knowing Jesus at all, but we don't necessarily know the high points. We don't venture into the holy place. We don't venture into the glory. We don't know what's going to be there. That could be a little bit scary. That could be a little bit difficult. We go along that track. So it's an ordinary day, an ordinary Sunday, an ordinary way forward, isn't it? So I think we've got quite a lot in common with Moses, really, on this. So what about God in this? Look at this picture of God. God, well, what does he do first of all? He catches Moses' attention. Sends an angel with a burning bush. I often do that in the Bible. God doesn't just zap people, but he attracts their attention. And Moses says, what's this then? You know? You want to hear that? God, this morning, in an ordinary day, seeks to attract your attention. You say, Alastair, he's got my attention, I'm in church. No, that's not the same thing. Hopefully, I've got your attention. But that's not the same thing as God having your attention. In our everyday lives, he seeks. And there it might be a spiritual thing like the angel, or it might be an environmental, circumstantial thing like the burning bush to attract your attention. On Friday, I had a terribly easy day on Friday, but I was running out the other side of Sheffield, lovely afternoon, fantastic blue sky, amazing blue sea, and I'm running down one of those lanes with the hedges and those thorn bushes, and when I'm coming to one of these thorn trees, quite a big tree, there's this bird singing. Now then, this is a bulk bird imitation. It was like this. I do him an injustice, but it was, sort of thing. In the real world, I hope you're smiling at that point. I can't see it at all. All right. Wave if you're smiling. All right. Yeah, that's much better. That's great. But this bird, you see, and I thought, that's a great bird, isn't it? What bird is that, you see? So I'm stopping and I'm looking up at this tree, and this I couldn't see what it was. It's just a little fluffy thing. It's going, and I'm looking through this thorn tree, which is just coming into leaf, and this amazing blue sky, and these bright leaves, and this little thing in there go. And I had to smile because I'm running this sermon through and I thought, he has got my attention. I have stopped. I'm not running down there, I'm looking up there at him. And he's made by God, and so is the tree, and so is the blue sky. God wants to catch our attention, Perhaps it's through somebody else. It's just a little thing that happens. It doesn't have to be written on a cloud. It could be through the Word of God in the Bible. I just came across this quote, I think this is tremendous, about God catching our attention through the Bible. It says this: the difference between the Bible words and the incarnate world, that is Christ, is the difference between the recipe and the bread. Essential as the recipe is, it is not the recipe that attracts people most. It is the smell of freshly baked bread. In smelling that bread, the soul is reminded of the hunger it has for so long been suppressing. It is the smell that entices the soul to taste, and the taste that entices it to eat. In so many ways, then, have your ears and eyes and noses open that God should attract your attention on an ordinary day as you're trogging along. He attracts his attention. And then he reveals himself in all his Old Testament glory. This is Sinai writ large, isn't it? After the burning bush, that's bad enough, isn't it? And then God speaks the word. Wow. And then there's the holy ground. Stop, don't come anywhere near here. Take off your shoes. And he covers his head. He doesn't want to see God. This is awesome. This is wonder. This is terrifying stuff. This is just what you get in the Old Testament, isn't it? And this is the God who reveals himself to Moses on an ordinary day. Same God as today. The God who reveals himself in all. We're going to sing about it in a moment. Holy ground. The awesome God. And this awesome God then defines a relationship with him. He didn't have any relationship with God. You didn't do that in those days. He speaks to him. He calls him by name. He says, Moses, Moses. It's great to be called by name, isn't it? At the moment, we're getting towards elections, local elections. It's amazing how politicians are interested in just before elections, And they address me. I mean, nationally, they talk about the British people. Well, presumably that's me. But you don't feel it's me. I feel like British people. And then there's everything, putting Cornwall first. Presumably I'm Cornwall, but it's just not the same, is it? And then putting Penzance first. Perhaps I'm Penzance, I don't know. But, nobody says, hi, Alastair. And God says, not hail, Israelites, he says, Moses. And he speaks to us by name. It's a personal thing. He defines that, extraordinary. And then he tells him his name. I am who I am. In ancient times, when you knew a God's name, and although this is superstition, then you had power over that God. You had access to the God. This is the very beginning of God making himself vulnerable to a human being. I'll tell you my name. What? All this power and all this flame and all this holy ground. I will tell you my name. I will define a relationship. I will start a conversation with you. We will talk. Wow. And then finally, it's not really our main purpose today. He gives him a job. And he says, you're going to bring the Israelites out of Egypt. It's a huge job. I will be with you. Now, what sort of day of that is that now? Who's talking about the sheep now? Who's just going between the wilderness and the mountains? This is a new day, isn't it? He's got a new task and a new mission. He doesn't even want it, but he's got it. And it certainly stirs him up, doesn't it? It's quite amazing. And I think it's interesting to think with hindsight, he must have thought, I thought that was just any other day. But that little journey along with the sheep turned out to be what we call liminal space, God's waiting room. A place where you are waiting, though you don't know it, for something else to happen. I'm just here with the sheep, but just over there is the burning bush going to pop up. That could be something. And you feel that, well, okay, that's where God is in the story. But you'll think, yeah, but we're in the New Testament. God is not quite like that. Well, no, God is not quite like that. Not because Jesus reveals that God is more soft, liberal and easygoing, but he reveals more of God. Jesus said, if you have seen me, you have seen the Father. I and my Father are one. God is just the same, but with extras in the New Testament. And you can see the glory there at Christmas. The light shine on the shepherds, and the glory of the Lord shone on them, and that became holy ground like a spotlight, and they were sore afraid. You get that on the Transfiguration, and it was holy ground, and all the light and the voice. And Peter says, this is holy ground, we better build something on it and make it into a shrine. You get this in our resurrection experiences with the light and the angels, and people are sore afraid. With the ascension, we will get the same. Even in the arrest, when Jesus says, when they say to him, Are you Jesus of Nazareth? He says, I am, ego eimi, which is the Greek for the Hebrew, I am. They all fell to the ground in front of him. It burst through. This is the same God. So that if you think of one of the most easygoing passages in the New Testament, where Jesus goes along the lakeside and calls those first disciples. He's there, they got a boat and a net, and he says, follow me. And they followed him, and I'll make you fishers of men. How friendly is that? Think that Jesus is still the great I am. That beach is holy ground. He breaking into their day, and you can see it come out in the second when it's run through again after Easter, which we've just done, by the lakeside after the resurrection. And you can see it breaking through much more. He stands there on the beach in the darkness, and he attracts their attention by a miracle, giving them all that fish. And by what? What is it on the lakeside at dawn? There is a fire. And then he engages them in conversation. He calls Peter by name. He makes the conversation. They are afraid. Nobody wants to ask him who he is, because he is making a conversation between them and somebody they think is dead. How awesome is that? Sinai, the New Testament, and today, he is the same Lord for you this morning. So, if you think it was just having an ordinary day, ordinary week, with your disappointments, with your angst, perhaps, or with your not quite fitting in and wanting to be somewhere else or somehow else or somebody else or whatever it is, just getting on with life is pretty good, but we're just getting on between the mountain and the plain, between the sunshine and the rain, between great blessing and great disaster. I'm just carrying on. Have your ears and your eyes open that the Lord in some way should be catching your attention, because he will be seeking you as he loves you, as he sought Moses, as he sought those disciples. And he will draw you onto holy ground. Don't come otherwise, but he draws you onto holy ground and says, come into this holy space with me. Wow. We do that with awe and reverence and not casualness and no hey man sort of thing. And yet he talks to us and he engages you in a conversation. And he has a new day for you. And something changes. And you sense that this was not just ordinary. And this was in fact liminal space, liminal time, when you were given a new opportunity, a new start, a new beginning by this great God who is friendly and loving and approachable in Christ, but is also mighty. It's that mixture of the friendship, the fatherhood, and the glory that really makes this work, doesn't it? He can and he will. He loves to and he is able. Bernard is going to come and lead us now. And we're just going to think about being on holy ground. This is a spiritual thing, isn't it? You know, he brings us on holy ground, I think. If we were to be able to black this building out, which we definitely cannot do, all right, you could imagine if I black this entire building out, all right, and somebody has a follow spot and puts one of those follow spots they look up on the theatre and just drops it onto you. So you are in a pool of light, of God's power and God's love and acceptance. Good picture.